Basketball fans, welcome back. You already know what this is. This is the best, the most entertaining, the most informational, and the most educational basketball content on the planet in the form of a podcast. Tate's Take. Find it anywhere you find your favorite podcast. iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Red Circle, streaming live on YouTube. I see you out there. Appreciate everybody for doing that. Remember to go and tell a friend to do so. And also, make sure to follow along on social media at Tate's Take Hoops, TATESTAKEHOOPS. Now, I know I told some people that we've got Krysten Peek, who's going to be coming on from Rivals as well as from Yahoo Sports. That'll be at 4:40 p. Eastern Standard Time. But first, before we do that, I told you I had a special guest. I don't know very many people. Not that I know this guy all that long, because I tell you what, I don't know him all that well. However, I get a very good sense that spider tingly type of feeling. Plus, I got some confirmation from a good buddy of ours in TJ Reeves that this is a big college basketball guy. And I said, you know what? What better way to find out how big of a college basketball guy that this guy particularly is? As I'm bringing him in right now, I'd like to show some love. Coming into the locker room with us, Colby Dant, a writer, college basketball analyst, and podcast host from the College Experience Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Catch him on social media with a ton of information. I know people are like, a lot of people hit me up, Colby, and they're like, where do I go? I want to place some bets, but I don't know where to go. Do I need a bookie? Do you know some people? Blah, blah, blah. At the Colby D on Twitter, at THECOLBYD. Colby, man, what's up?
How you doing? Thanks for having me on, man. What are we, 10 days away?
I know, dude. I'm counting. I'm literally counting down. It's like I got the big clock right over my head with the seconds winding down like the ball is going to drop on New Year's Eve or something, dude. I'm so excited. It makes no sense. Let me ask you this. Like, what do you think it's going to entail? Like, you can't put these teams in bubbles or whatever, what have you. Stuff is looking crazy. So much stuff doesn't even really appear to be like confirmed. What kind of college basketball season do you think that we're going to have?
I mean, I think it's going to be one of these ones where if you're a diehard fan, you just got to learn to appreciate it. I mean, I cover college football as well, and I had a Cal UCLA game on this morning, 9 a.m. in LA. They had to kick off, and a lot of fans were not happy about that. And I just say it's 2020. This whole year's been crazy, and yeah. I expect. I mean, when come March, when we have to the tournament or the committee's got to put teams in. Good luck, because I think there's gonna be a lot of examples of a team that might be 20-6 and another team that might be 12-2, and I think it's going to be, with colleges, they're going to have to scramble. You're seeing like BYU in college football this year. Okay. BYU's an independent that scrambled, they were 6-0 and they're like, okay, Mountain West is coming back. Let's get Boise State on the schedule. Let's get San Diego State on the schedule. Let's add, they're adding games. And I think you're going to see games canceled. I mean, did you see what Rick Pitino said yesterday?
I was just going to ask you about that. Fill the people in.
Okay. Yeah. Rick Pitino, basically he's he's back coaching. He's not in Greece anymore. He's at Iona, and they've been hit with it. I think they've canceled their first game. I'm not 100% on that, but I believe their first game is canceled. They were supposed to tip off with everybody else the day before Thanksgiving, and he basically said, "Hey guys, we can't do this. We need to do a May Madness. We got to push the start date back." And my problem, like, I get Rick's situation, and I know this is a terrible situation throughout college basketball and college athletics, let alone professional sports. But my thing is, who's to say it's going to be better then?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, I understand, Pfizer released some information, but I mean, about they might have an answer, but I just say, man, we got to play the games. The players want to play the games. I'm not saying, and then it's going to be messy, and we just try our best. And my thing is just enjoy the matchups we get, because I expect complete chaos. How about you?
For sure. No, for sure. Hey, listen, I I expect chaos. It's college basketball, and just like any other time, the closer you get to March, the more chaos you're going to get. I mean, I didn't even think there could be more chaos than there was just over the course of the entire season last year, where nobody looked like they wanted to be the front runner, to be the best team in the country. I mean, in a very short span, it seemed like week after week. At one point, starting out the season at Michigan State, then it was Kentucky. Kentucky loses to Evansville. Then it's Duke or whomever, and then they lose, Stephen F. Austin at some point. And then, you get Baylor up in there, and they started not looking as good after running off all this big number of games. Louisville was in that conversation at one point. I think Gonzaga was probably there. It was nuts. It was crazy. I wasn't really sure what to make of it, but and that's just what college basketball is. And I learned to kind of embrace that myself just a little bit. Just because of I kind of like the uncertainty a little bit, not always knowing that Carolina, who had a terrible year last year, if there was anybody, let me just say this real quick, and I'm definitely want you to talk a whole lot more than me because I can do this forever. But Carolina was one of the few teams that I thought really kind of, it sounds weird, but benefited from there not being a tournament because how bad they were. They finished last in the ACC. Georgia Tech, who did the self-imposed ban. They finished 5th in the ACC, but couldn't go to the tournament. There was no tournament. So it counted as if, they used their ban for a year that they couldn't even go anyway. Florida was expected to be really good. Louisville, Texas, these teams that didn't really pan out to be very well. And that's another question I have for you before we get into Gonzaga about Texas. Shaka Smart, I can only imagine, has got to be one of the highest guys on the hot seat at this point. What do you think that he needs to do bare minimum in order to secure that job outside of recruiting really good guys like Greg Brown?
I'm just gonna say at least Sweet 16. Maybe he can get past with one tournament win. But I'll say this: I mean, in general, and this goes for all college sports, but obviously college basketball, is that this might actually, since it's University of Texas, they have endless money, so maybe they'll find a way to do this. But most coaches, in a way, buy themselves a year or two because COVID and these schools are strapped financially. Now, Texas might be the one outlier here where Shaka, who I like Shaka, I loved his VCU teams. I'm rooting for the guy. But at the same time, I still could see Texas being like, all right, your time is done here, if you don't get it going here. And it was kind of surprising because I really thought when they hired him, and the irony here is Barnes had some decent years at Tennessee, and they're supposed to be good this year. But I thought there was finally the answer. Perhaps I bought in. I don't know about you, but I definitely bought in. And I will say this: we're going back to your statement previously about how crazy the college basketball season was a season ago. Mm-hmm. I just previewed the Missouri Valley Conference on the College Experience, and I was going through, and Evansville that you mentioned went winless in the Missouri Valley Conference. And I understand there was some in-house stuff that got crazy, but they went winless and yet they won at Kentucky. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that will never happen again.
Yeah, dude, that was nuts just to see the way that whole thing kind of unraveled and transpired. It was just like the weirdest thing in the world. And what you were saying about Texas, I think is definitely spot on. I think it definitely helps him being in a situation where Texas is a predominantly football priority type of institution when it comes to their athletics. Now, I'm not going to say they don't give a damn about their basketball program by any means, but and I'll just be honest. Yes, Rick Barnes had some success. I'm not a Rick Barnes guy personally.
Me neither.
I think he's a great recruiter. And I think that he's a pretty damn good regular season coach. But when I think that he definitely has some, let me see if I can throw around some really cute words here. I think that he's definitely a little vulnerable to being outcoached in the tournament and one and done, win or go home type of situations. And so that's just kind of my whole little take on Rick Barnes. But he's been doing a good job. You mentioned how Tennessee is going to be right there close to the top of the SEC. I'm not sure I said the SEC is loaded, but the SEC, I like to think, should be somewhat better, or at least right around the same range as they were last year. What sticks out to you when we're talking about a team like Gonzaga? Okay. Preseason number one, coming into the season, what sticks out to you about them in regards to should they start out number one? Are you a believer in Gonzaga that they can be a team that can cut down the nets? Are you a Gonzaga guy? What concerns you? What are the things that doesn't necessarily concern you about them?
If you're a Gonzaga fan, I feel bad because I also think last year you probably had as good a shot as any. I mean, I was actually a bit surprised to see them number one, to tell you the truth. I had read publications and I'd seen publications had said that, they're 1, 2, or 3. And I was even a little bit shocked at that because when I break down the team, they lost a lot. They lost, four real key players, Gilder, Woodridge, Petrusev. I mean, I can go on and on.
Killian Tilly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how do I forget that? But I mean, I understand that, there's a ton of hype around this Jalen Suggs kid. I had people on Twitter tagging me in his high school tape and stuff. And so I understand he's a complete stud, but at the same time, I was a bit shocked to see their number one. I don't trust it, but I would bet against that. I mean, but at the same time, I would love to see Gonzaga. I like what Mark Few's been doing there and really elevating that program. But at the same time, do I trust it? I don't. And I would actually argue that that other teams are better, that deserve to be better, or that deserve the number one spot, essentially.
Who is that other team real quick before I have you go ahead and tell the people where, if you mentioned betting against it, if somebody looking for some bets to take, I want you to also be able to give them that website so that you can, I want to point the people in that direction as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you go to sportsgamblingpodcast.com, we'll direct you everywhere. But at the same time, I mean, we are sponsored by mybookie.ag, so I would rep them. But at the same time, I mean, it is an open field, and I think college basketball has been changing so much, man. As you've seen recently, kind of with a little bit of struggles with Kentucky and Duke and stuff, and I think that has to do with the one and dones. Essentially, I think that there's a little bit of a shifting going on where you're going after the one and dones, and it kind of ruins your chemistry because you got to start it all over again next year. And the teams like a Texas Tech, or perhaps like we saw with Baylor, or they're having players that are there 2, 3, 4 years, and they can build up the chemistry a little bit better. So I do think it's really interesting to see that dynamic play itself out in college basketball. But just because of that, I mean, I'll be honest. Okay, I don't enjoy watching this team play.
Okay,
but Virginia is one that is like, look, I like Tony Bennett. I think he's great. But I mean, I watched a game last year, and I thought what he did coaching last year was absolutely amazing, by the way. I thought it was his best coaching job he's ever done. But I watched the game against, I think it was like Navy, where it was 42-40 with like 4 minutes left. And I'm like, this is Navy. You can't be doing this. But at the same time, they were red hot right before COVID hit, and I wouldn't want to play them because how good they are defensively. But I think coming in, they're getting Hauser, the transfer, and they're getting a money freshman, Sharif Abdul-Rahim's son. Mm-hmm. So I would expect them to really I mean, I would put them, like if you're telling me they're playing Gonzaga tomorrow, I would favor Virginia. How about you?
That makes a lot of sense. I definitely take them too, just because, I mean, I know that they're going to rock a lot of people to sleep with the way that they play and defensively and those things, and they tend to struggle offensively sometimes. And so games are always going to be close. And I would definitely hate that if I'm a fan of the Who's. But nonetheless, I tend to kind of like the style a little bit. It could be a little bit more offense for me, but I'm more of a defensive guy. I mean, you see it hanging right over here over my shoulder. I'm a Michigan State dude, so I love the defense and all that physicality and all that good stuff. Bringing back a guy like Jay Huff, I mean, it feels like the dude's been there, since I was in middle school. And that's just kind of how I feel about it. I love Kyahi Clark. Obviously, as a point guard, very few people, if you look back over the last 20 years, I think it's only probably been about 4 guys who were starting point guards on a national championship team and as freshmen. And so I obviously really like him. I saw him play on the AAU level at the Nike EYBL Peach Jam. And I think his best offer at that point was like UC Davis or something, which was crazy. Wow. He's not much bigger than me. I'm 5'9", 5'10", 150 pounds, dude, with rocks in my pockets probably. But, when you start shifting a little bit more towards Gonzaga, I think from what I've been able to see is that Gonzaga appears to me to be the type of team where they know that they had to beef up their non-con a little bit. They've done that. There are some of those games which they win. We saw that a couple years ago in the Maui against Duke. And there's games where they're going to lose some of those. I think I saw that against like Kansas or Tennessee not too long ago. Nonetheless, but they'll win those games. But when you tend to shift over more towards the area of the West Coast Conference, okay, you have so many games, minimum 18 or something, and I feel like they kind of adjust to that kind of competition. Now you have to jump out of that right away to try and jump into playing really good competition again in a one and done situation. They've got to step it up in conference, dude. I mean, you if it's not the Pac-12, okay, fine. But you got to at least go Mountain West and get your San Diego States and your New Mexicos and so forth in there. Who are some of the freshmen? As you know, we are joined in the locker room right now by Colby Dant, writer, college basketball analyst, and podcast host from the College Experience Sports Gambling Podcast. Find them on Twitter at the Colby D. And soon to come within the next 20 minutes, as promised, I've got Krysten Peek coming in from Rivals as well as from Yahoo Sports. Who are some of the freshmen that you see, Colby, that you think either will surprise some people this year, maybe not getting enough recognition, and or maybe just some guys that you think are really going to be dominant? You got high expectations for them.
Well, I mentioned one, and like I said, maybe it's just because like in the past, I released my West Coast Conference preview, and I was a bit, I guess I still had Gonzaga winning it, but I guess I was harsh on them a little bit. But some fans, really, tweeted me in some videos of Jalen Suggs. So from the start, I was impressed by the videos, but I mean, to have Gonzaga number one, he's got to be a huge impact player because of what they lost. So that one I would circle as number one. And then I look at, John Calipari and what, Kentucky, like I said, they've kind of had a little bit of, I don't want to say struggles because they're still really good, but they haven't been traditionally as well as they were a few years ago. And this year's class, he has 3 freshmen coming in, and Devin Askew, BJ Boston, and Terrence Clark that are supposed to be big-time players instantly. Mm-hmm. And I think some of those will probably end up being one-and-dones. And I'm really intrigued to see how they gel. I've read a lot of publications have Kentucky in the top 5, top 10. And I know that I've seen some tape on some of these guys, and they look like the real deal, just like I feel like any Kentucky freshman, you ever see the tape, you're going to be like, oh, yeah. But at the same time, I'm intrigued to see how fast they can start gelling together. So those ones are the really. I mean, there's other freshmen I could go, team by team, but that really stand out to me. I'm intrigued to see how fast that could happen. I did want to ask you this though. Sure. We were talking about Kihei Clark, and this year doesn't count against your eligibility. So Huff and Clark. I can't imagine, this is not a shot at Jay Huff. I can't imagine that the NBA scouts are drooling at Jay Huff. So I think they're going to be back next year. Yeah. And how do you think this is going to change the landscape of college basketball? We talk about we just talked about Calipari and the 3 freshmen. Well, if they're one and done, you're going to have some of these other schools, Virginia's or the mid majors, maybe Gonzaga, maybe a San Diego State, that will have guys now. If they redshirted as a freshman, they're going to be 6-year seniors. Mm-hmm. I think this could really strengthen. I don't want to say that definitely the mid majors, but I will say like the middle of the road, a team like Providence or something. Where normally they don't have guys going one and done. What do you think like that for the next 2-3 years in college basketball, this impact will have on the sport?
Yeah, it's wild, dude. Just to even think about that. I mean, I think that, a lot of the kids are starting to kind of consider, because I don't think the G League thing is really going to work out all that well as much as people probably think that it will. But you start adding in the NIL, the name, image, and likeness in a lot of this stuff. And of course, that's going to help a whole lot too. But, kids want to get that that experience, on campus. Now, in terms of guys that where the year doesn't really count against the eligibility, but you get an opportunity to go out there and still, be active and playing in real game situations with or without people in the seats or whatever, what have you. I think it's tremendous. I think it's outstanding personally. I feel like it's a win-win type of situation. I mean, I hate the thought that we could realistically be looking at, players out there that could be like 7-year seniors. I think at one point, I think Carl Krauser was like 26 years old or something like that, based on New York point guard for Pittsburgh. Like, it's crazy to even fathom a lot of this stuff. But, as you can see over the course of the last few years, those one and done programs, the Dukes, sometimes Kansas, Kentucky, obviously, who really build their program now off of these one and done players and not winning national championships. I don't know how to feel. I'm almost kind of curious to how does it feel to be a long time diehard Kentucky fan where everything is about hanging nothing but national championship banners, and you haven't won one in probably 8 or 9 years now, but you're getting the best recruits in the country, but you're not winning titles. Like, are people kind of against that? I don't know. And I'm curious to know, even if you're a Coach Cal type of guy, but nonetheless, you're looking at some of these programs that have been winning national championships. I don't think there's been a team that's been so heavily relied upon their freshmen since Duke in 2015 that have cut down nets when you're looking at Villanova twice and Virginia and so on and so forth in that Carolina team.
Yeah. And I mean, that's an interesting way. That's what I'm saying. I feel like the sport is kind of shifting some, and especially when you add in this COVID year and then the eligibility rules that this year's not going to count against them. I think if I'm a Kentucky fan, I'm mad. If I'm a Duke fan, I might be mad. I might want to change my approach, maybe get some grad transfers. I know that Kentucky's got Obi Toppin's brother coming in, but I mean, I might try to do that a little more because I look at, Villanova and Virginia, and I just think, yeah, I could see Nova losing one maybe or something like that, but they're going to be pretty much the same team, and that team's only going to get stronger because Wright's recruiting decent. He recruits good players, but for some reason they don't end up like top 10 lottery picks. You know what I mean? Like, and Virginia for the most part as well. So I think it strengthens them. Even a team like Baylor this year that we talked about at one point last year, I was convinced that we're the best team in the country. I was like, oh man, this team is the best team in the country. And then they kind of lost it, but at the same time, I think it strengthens teams like that. So I'm really intrigued to see how it works out. I will say this though, another freshman I'm excited about. I'm kind of bullish on the Fighting Illini this year, and I know you're a Michigan State guy, so I'm curious your thoughts on the Illini. They got a freshman named Trent Frazier that's coming in. Adam Miller. I'm sorry, Adam Miller. Yeah. But I'm excited to see how the Illini do this year. I think Underwood's been building for. I was actually bullish on them last year a little bit, and it kind of burned me a little bit. Sure. But I'm intrigued. What do you think of the Illini this year?
Well, you know what? I liked them a lot last year and a little bit the year before too. Obviously, Ayo Dosunmu is an absolute stud. I think this year is going to help him out a whole lot. I mean, you're talking about a grown-ass man in Kofi Coburn. I'm not really in love with the way his last name is spelled. I'm kind of glad I got the name Tate, but nonetheless, I will say enough to say that this dude's just a complete animal. It's like he's 30. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's like serious. I think he's going to be playing for the Jamaican national team this year, which I'm going to do some work with them as well right before the draft on Tuesday night, sometime around 8. But I'm excited about what their team can be. I like Brad Underwood for the fact that he kind of always has that Gene Katie scowl a little bit. He loves defense. He gets on his players. Sometimes I think that he does himself a little bit of a disservice of that. But then I also feel that way about Izzo, where he's just kind of constantly riding guys. But I like to think it's for the betterment of the player for them to perform. So I do like Illinois. I get the feeling that it's very similar to Iowa. And I want to pick your brain on them a little bit too, to see how you feel about them, because, a lot of people expecting for them to win the Big Ten, them along, Wisconsin's in there. I mean, Michigan State's in there. Who knows what Michigan's going to do, trying to prep for a big recruiting class. Last year, they went from not ranked to like top 5 after after their preseason tournament. So I think it's going to be a very good conference overall. I just get the feeling that between Iowa and Illinois, I'm somewhere in the middle. I probably don't like them as much as a lot of people do, but I think I like them more than some other people. I like Illinois a little bit more than I do Iowa, just because they don't seem so one-dimensional, trying to build everything around Luka Garza or one guy. What says you?
Man, we agree on a lot, man. I mean, Gonzaga, just like with Gonzaga, I would say Iowa, I expect Iowa to have a fantastic regular season. You know, McCaffrey's got that program doing good. Obviously getting Garza back is huge. A guy averaged basically 24 points a game last year. And I think that you analyze their lineup. You say, okay, yeah, Bohannon, Frederick, all these guys that are key contributors, they're back. So why would we not be bullish on the Hawkeyes? Mm-hmm. I think they'll have a great regular season, but I will look to fade them in the NCAA tournament because they're going to run up against a team. And this is not a shot at Garza, but sometimes when an elite defender is guarding him, I don't think he's nearly the player that his stats represent. And so when they play a super athletic team, they have problems. And I expect the same thing will happen. I'll probably fade them they'll probably win one game in the tournament and then or one or two, but I'll look to fade them early. But I know a lot of people are really bullish on the Hawkeyes this year. So, but Illinois, like I said, I think their style fits me. I have them over the Hawkeyes just as you do. So. And I think they're only going to get better, and I'm excited to see that freshman play with those guys that you mentioned. So, yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I feel the same way that I am not – Garza, look, you're a fantastic player. I wish you, the best pro basketball experience. But I tend to – I would fade the Hawkeyes. If I like Michigan State over them. I even think Wisconsin can be better than Iowa too. But I still think they'll have a good regular season. They'll be a decent seed in the tournament.
Yeah, for Wisconsin, who has pretty much everybody coming back at this point, I think that they're probably the front runners for me. I don't know where they're at in the top 10. I think somewhere around 7 or somewhere around that range, the bottom half of the top 10. But, the way that they play, I mean, it's Wisconsin, for crying out loud. You know what they're going to do. They're going to backdoor you to death, and they're going to crash the boards hard. They're going to be physical up front. They're going to be they're a coachable team, so they're going to be disciplined. Everybody coming back. Demetri Price, I mean, all these guys, Brad Davison, I mean, it's crazy just to think that they were even slotted down so low as they were. I would have thought that they would have been ranked higher than Gonzaga. But the crazy thing about Gonzaga will be the fact, I think, that, where they're non-conference, whether they take an L or two early because they play in the West Coast Conference, this preseason rank of number 1 is going to appear justifiable after they get into West Coast Conference scheduling, and then everybody else has to play better competition, and then they take L's. Here comes Gonzaga back to be number 1. A couple more questions here for you. Probably got a couple minutes left here with you. Appreciate you, Colby Dant, for checking in with us as well. Is there a team and or player, and I kind of group it like this for a reason. Dayton obviously looked magnificent last year, a mid-major team. Obi Toppin looked really good. I mean, it's crazy to think dude's probably about 22 or 23-year-old sophomore, I guess. I don't know how that really works. Don't ask. But do you see any players in college basketball this year that is very similar to Obi Toppin, where it's like they kind of came out of nowhere and is serious contention for National Player of the Year, or even a team that can make a run similar to the way that Dayton was in, going towards that direction?
I mean, I feel horrible for Dayton fans, first off, because I really believe you had a chance at a national championship, a legit chance. I would have argued that they were as good as anyone come tournament time. But, man, as far as Obi Toppin, I'm not sure that I see one that's sitting out there that's like, okay, a mid-major player that is just that good. I mean, I will say I'm a huge fan of Jalen Crutcher, and he's back at Dayton, and I love what Anthony Grant's doing. So I expect them to be actually better than people project them to be, but at the same time, nothing like what they were. Sure. They were national contenders a year ago, but I will say that I look at the landscape in general. Like I think Creighton could be a kind of an exciting team this year. Zegrakowski back. I'm excited to watch them. But as far as like a true mid-major, I'm going to give you one that I don't expect them to be a national contender, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're actually in the West Coast Conference. I like what Mark Pope is doing at BYU. I think BYU is going to push Gonzaga more than people realize. As far as though to be a national champion, I'm drawing a blank. I would say,
even if it's not national champion, if it's a team that you see can maybe do like an Elite Eight when Davidson did their thing, or a Sweet 16, wearing the glass slipper type deal.
I think San Diego State will be good again. I think they'll make the tournament. And I here's one I'll circle that I like a lot is I like St. Louis and what Travis Ford is doing at St. Louis. They were a pretty young team. They returned almost everybody, and I felt like if you go back and look at that schedule, they lost a lot of close games. I remember Jalen Crutcher hit a three to beat them at the buzzer, and they also you learn how to win. They missed some big free throws in spots where they could have won games, and I think them returning everybody is. And the fact that Obi Toppin's gone also helps. But I mean, I like them in the A10. I think they could be, a dark horse. I know people are bullish on the Richmond Spiders, but I like St. Louis as a potential team that could really make some noise. I think they're pretty athletic. They still got French, the big man. So I expect them to really give some teams some fits. I know. I would also throw Houston in there with Calvin Sampson. I think I like their squad, but. Yeah, I mean, I would say I still see at best a Final Four or something, and that's with getting all the breaks. I still think this year it's looking like, as much as we talked about strengthening the mid majors essentially with the rules and everything. I still think, you look at the Virginias, the Villanova is one I'm really I could see Villanova winning it all this year. So I hope that answers your question. I would say BYU. I watch out for BYU. Watch out. San Diego State, I think, will still. Oh, how about this? I think San Diego State gets pushed by Boise State in the Mountain West.
Okay.
Keep an eye on Boise State.
Yeah, Boise State always one of those programs that can push you to that limit. I know a lot of people are like, really, Boise State? You're not really watching much college basketball over the course of the last handful of years if you're not really paying much attention to Boise State, and even had a couple players that have even got drafted out of Boise State and going on into the NBA to do big things. So I guess for you, St. Louis and Hassan French it is. For me, I'm going to stick with the Atlantic 10 too. I know you said people are bullish on the Spiders, but I am big on the Richmond Spiders, and I think that they are one of the teams not have enough really girth or anything like that up front in the front court necessarily, but we know that this is a guard-driven game already as is, and I think that they got, about 3 or 4 good ones over there in Richmond. What I want to do real quick, and I know that we've got Krysten Peek coming on, so I want to welcome you, Colby Dant, to what we call our special segment called Quick Release. Okay, so essentially what happens is I'll probably ask you about 6, 7, 8 questions, and they're primarily either one-word answers or just yes or no answers, that type of thing. And we try and do it like a rapid-fire type thing, but I don't want to go too crazy fast with it, but just to give you a little bit of an idea. My first question for you is, have you seen Imani Bates play yet?
Yeah, I've seen some clips.
Okay. Do you think he'll be in a Michigan State uniform at some point instead of maybe going G League or whatever?
Yes, I'm going to say yes.
Okay. If you are the Minnesota Timberwolves, who will you draft at number 1, assuming that they'll pick a player?
I would go Edwards. I know we differ on this, I think, right?
We do. Yeah. I actually was thinking more along the lines of out of the big man from Memphis personally. But Wiseman, yeah, nonetheless, I'm not sure either one of us will probably be right on that. I think it's probably going to be more along the lines of a LaMelo Ball. Who has the better NBA career, or who gets drafted first? Let's go with that. Vernon Carey Jr. or Isaiah Stewart?
Stewart.
Okay. Good deal. Where does or where should Russell Westbrook land?
Oh man, I mean, I'm in LA, man, and they love him here. So I mean, that would be the first thought. But I mean, is that first off? They're denying that the reports too, right? Are they still denying?
I since the podcast, I haven't had an opportunity to check the phone and see, but I'm not sure I saw a report about denying.
Okay, I thought I saw. Okay, maybe I saw someone tweeting that wasn't official. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna say let's make Los Angeles happen. Either the Clippers or the Lakers, I say. But I know that obviously that a trade's got to happen. So I don't know what would be given up. I don't know how that would work out with their roster. So LA, come home.
My last question for you. Are you ready to hear LeVar Ball's mouth this week?
Look, everyone hates him. Everyone hates him more than I. I mean, look, yeah, sure, yeah, I can do this. I can do that. I can brace in. I get it. I know what he's about, and I think he's misunderstood a little bit.
A little bit, maybe. Don't tell him that. I hope he's not listening to the podcast, which I hope he is listening to the podcast all at the same time. Colby Dant joining us in the locker room. I really appreciate you, Colby. Thank you so much, man. Writer, college basketball analyst, podcast host, rather, from the College Experience Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Make sure you go and follow this dude. Do me a huge favor. Make sure you do that on Twitter at the Colby D, at TheColbyd on Twitter. And thank you so much, man. We got to do this again, dude. I mean, I can just go on and on. I feel so bad for Krysten Peek, dude. It's like she's waiting and she's in the waiting room. She's in the green room. We can talk basketball all day long, dude. And I can't wait to get to that segment with her too. But I want to thank you for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. And let's do it anytime, man. Always a pleasure.
For sure. Thank you so much, man. My dude, Colby Dant, man, joined us, and really happy that we had the opportunity for him to do that. We pick his brain a little bit about college basketball and all that good stuff, and sent him through the ringer a little bit, maybe with our quick release segment, and got some pretty interesting answers. And hopefully Krysten wasn't listening to too much of that, because I got a couple of the same questions that I want to ask her. And without further ado, I want to make sure that I have the opportunity to bring her on. Speaking of college basketball, but she doesn't just do that. She does high school basketball. She's all across the globe. She's doing all sorts of really neat things, and also NBA. So she's everywhere. And I'm really happy to bring you on. First time that you had the opportunity to come on with us. And if I'm not mistaken, okay, so the last time I saw you, Krysten, we were in Athens for Georgia and Kentucky, I think it was. That's where we kind of exchanged contact information.
Yeah.
But one way or another, and don't ask me how this works, but some way, somehow, I always find a way, front row seat, okay, in North Augusta, South Carolina, at the Peach Jam. I always find a way to end up sitting next to you somehow. I'm not sure how that works, but it works out just fine. And hopefully I don't have any really bad BO or anything during that time. Thanks for coming on.
I know, it's been 2 years. We've sat next to each other at Peach Jam for the semifinals night. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I'm so happy for you to be able to come on. Make sure that you follow Krysten, who's a 3-level basketball analyst from Yahoo Sports and Rivals.com, at Krysten Peek, K-R-Y, not K-R-I, K-R-Y-S-T-E-N-P-E-E-K, not P-E-A-K, P-E-E-K. Follow her on Twitter. I want to jump into some stuff here. Obviously, this week, Krysten, we had the opportunity to see what was this? I think it's the Next Up, I think, or can't think of the showcase exactly that it was called. We saw the Imani Bates and the Ipsy Prep against Team Sizzle, which I'm not sure why the names are really like that. Maybe you have an explanation for that, why it's not the high school name. Okay, explain that to us.
So the reason why they're doing that is because for some of the states which these teams are competing in, their season isn't starting until March. And so these games aren't counting towards their actual record of the season. And these are more like showcases. So if you're a prep school like Imani Bates' team, you can wear your jerseys. If you're actual public high school like Minnehaha, you have to go as a club team. And so we saw them do that. Also, Coronado High School went as a club team, and then also Sierra Canyon when they played after that. So that's why we're seeing the club names on the jerseys. Yeah.
Yeah, Arenado and CBC. Okay, that makes sense, I guess, now that you explained it, because I got a couple phone calls and text messages and emails, and it's like, why are they doing this? And I'm like, I usually have an answer for everything. I don't want people to be like, you're supposed to be the basketball dude. You're supposed to know this stuff. I don't know, but we're going to bring on Krysten Peek on Sunday, and maybe we can ask her that question so we can figure that whole thing out. Thank you for explaining that. If how can let me ask you this. When it comes to University of Michigan, okay, they've got the #1 recruiting class for 2021, Caleb Houston, Musa
Frankie Collins,
yep, Frankie Collins, Kobe Buffkin, all those guys. What do you think makes Juwan Howard in Ann Arbor what seems like all of a sudden such an attractive move to some of these recruits?
He's a closer, and we've seen it now. This is year 2. 2 years ago, we saw with Penny Hardaway and Mike Miller. And these kids, their futures aren't guaranteed, but they see someone like Juwan Howard, and he knows what it takes to get there. He did all right last season. They won, solid number of games. And so he's a good salesman into these recruits buying into the Michigan program and him being the mentor to help them get to the NBA. And I have recently, we all saw Frankie Collins, and he's super bouncy. I saw Buffkin. Yeah, I saw him 2 weeks ago, and he's super bouncy. And I texted Juwan Howard. I was like, where are you finding these sneaky bouncy 6'2", 6'3" guards? Their backcourt is going to be so much fun in a couple of years.
Let me ask you this, because I can only go so long. As of course, my people know, you see my little ball over here with my little Sparty hanging up. So I don't want Spartan Nation to be breaking out in hives or anything like, you're being biased. You didn't ask Krysten any questions about Michigan State. They've got the currently #6 recruiting class in the country, Max Christie, Jaden Akins, a teammate of Imani Bates. We saw that as well. What can the fan base for Michigan State, Spartan Nation, kind of expect from these two players? And do you think Imani Bates will even be in a Michigan State uniform at any point? Maybe even reclassify? I think that's just kind of something that's been swirling around.
Right. So in terms of Imani Bates, I don't see him reclassifying. Just in the case, well, he's not going to be old enough to be an NBA player. So it's either stay in high school and, he still kind of has control of his game schedule, his everyday schedule, his diet. His dad kind of is still in charge there, or play 2 years at Michigan State. I think he's just going to stay. And I think it's maybe 30-40% that he actually ends up at Michigan State and not somewhere like the G League. Mm-hmm. But as of right now, he's doing his part and getting other players there, like Enoch Bawaki, who was the #1 Canadian player. He's joining him in Imani's class. And like you said, Max Christie, another 5-star. So Tom Izzo, he always is going to find a way to get the job done, and he's good at pinpointing the talent that he needs for his program and guys he can insert there that may not necessarily be one-and-done players like Max Christie or Imani Bates, but that can really do great things for the program.
For sure. Now there's another guy, okay, whose daddy is just very famous. Everybody knows this guy. From CBC, okay, and Sierra Canyon High School, Bronny James. And I'm getting a text message. I'm hearing from people, and they're talking about how bad he is, and he stinks. He's overrated. He shouldn't be. I think he's top 25 or somewhere in that range. That being their personal opinions. Do you think that he is getting that, unfair expectations from people, unfair criticism? And we know that, he's still really young, obviously, so he can still improve on some things just like any other player. But what area of his game do you think probably doesn't get enough credit sometimes?
I think his defense doesn't get enough credit. He was definitely the most active defender on the Sierra Canyon team when they played Jaden Hardy last week. And you have to remember, and nobody knows this, I spoke to the coach last week, and they haven't even gone 5-on-5 in practice. Wow. Because in California, they can only have 3 players in the gym at once. They can only, as a team, weightlift outside. They can't even be indoors in the weight room working out. So that game against Jaden Hardy and Coronado or Arenado, that was the first time that they'd ever gone 5-on-5. And, you gotta look at it as like a preseason game, right? There's going to be cobwebs. People are going to take bad shots. Amari Bailey took a lot of bad shots. Bronny took a lot of bad shots. So I think as the season progressed, like his basketball IQ is already so high. He's going to get more comfortable, and we're going to start seeing some improvement.
Is there a player that maybe on the high school level that is kind of flying under the radar, maybe not getting the recognition, or nobody's really talking about them enough, that you think can surprise, take a leap, or is poised for a breakout season? It kind of, and I just say this, it just kind of reminds me of how Colin Sexton went from like this high 3-star into instantly just like this top 5, top 10 guy. Do you see anybody on the high school level? Me personally, I like Kennedy Chandler. I know he's pretty high ranked, but Zion Harmon is another one of those guys who I absolutely love. Is there somebody on the circuit that you see that's like, watch out for this guy because he's one you want to keep your eyes and your ears open for?
Yeah, there's this player. He's a junior. His name's Shaden Sharp. He's a wing, super bouncy. Michigan State has offered him. But right now he's like a top 60 player. He plays for Dream City Christian outside of Phoenix, Arizona. And he right now is like no rim stands a chance. If you mix the box out, not only is he getting that rebound, but he is dunking it hard. I mean, he is so fun to watch. He can score at all 3 levels. And if there were an AAU season, I think we would be talking about him as a top 20 player, not top 50, 60, 75 player.
Krysten Peek, 3-level basketball analyst from Yahoo Sports and Rivals.com, joining us. Follow her on Twitter at Krysten Peek with a Y, Krysten, KRYSTENPEEK. I'm sure that never probably gets old for you. I get consistently asked pretty often, Krysten, about different types of players and what type of talents they are. And I like to pat myself on the back a little bit because I like to try and keep up. Probably not as much as you, but at least I try. When it comes to guys like between these 3 players, maybe you can explain what kind of talent they are or what separates them and so forth, or who the better player is or whatever. So you got Paulo Banchero, who is a Duke commit out of Seattle, Washington. You have Jabari Smith, who is from the suburban Atlanta area going to Auburn. And you have J.D. Davison out of Alabama. Between those 3, and it doesn't really have to be about who's better, but what do those 3 guys kind of bring? Because sometimes I feel like, you know, for guys like Davison doesn't really get the credit sometimes. I'm just curious to know what you think about the 3 of those guys.
I don't know JD that well. Again, we didn't have a spring or summer, and he's from the South, so I haven't seen him that much. But I just saw Paolo and Jabari at a Pangos event 2 weekends ago. And the difference between them, you know, you look at Paolo, I think he's going to be more of a dominant college player. He's already 6'10". I think he told me he was 250. He looks like a monster, and he's one of those guys where he's just the game is so easy to him right now because he's dominating at every level on the high school scene. So it'll be interesting to see what he does in college, if he turns more into a stretch 4, you know, where he steps out in the pick and pop and learns to get more consistent knocking down the 3. So he's a pro. Him and Jabari, definitely pros. With Jabari, I mean, he's got the pedigree. His dad played 7 years in the NBA, and Jabari is just a true NBA wing. Like, he's got the length, he's got the speed, he's got the handle. He can knock it down from 3 deep if he wants, and he plays above the rim. So when you have NBA guys that are looking at those 2 specifically, I mean, they're already, you know, circling their name for guys to keep track of for the NBA draft time for sure.
Now, I told the people and teased it a little bit, letting them know the last time I saw you, we were in Athens for Georgia and Kentucky, and obviously Anthony Edwards and so forth. You obviously cover not just high school, but collegiate as well as in the NBA. I think it was probably about 2 weeks ago now. Okay. It was pro day for Anthony Edwards, and had that opportunity to kind of check him out and see what he was really all about for the people who haven't really seen workouts and so forth, obviously because of COVID and whatever else, what have you. But there were some reports in which I saw for myself, even some people were just really not all that impressed by his shooting. And I'm not sure how much of that you actually had a chance to see. How concerning was Ant-Man's pro day shooting performance? Does or should that hold any weight entering the draft?
I don't think it should hold any weight at all. You look at his shooting mechanics. He has one of the highest releases than anybody in the draft. He has great form, and he's a worker. So he has one bad workout with a ton of cameras on him, and everyone's, going, no, this kid isn't the number one pick. He's not the number one pick. He looks stronger. He looks more athletic. I think he looks more fluid on the court, and he looks faster to me. I don't know if it's just because none of us has seen him in so long in a game or anything, but I think, like, I've got my new mock draft coming out tomorrow, and I bumped him to number one. I just think he's a better fit for Minnesota. Now, if Minnesota decides to trade it, they could trade down. You and I were both at the game to a team like the Atlanta Hawks. We know Trae Young was sitting courtside at that Kentucky game. And the two of them, I think, would be an amazing young backcourt on a struggling team. And by the way, the worst defensive team in the NBA, the Hawks, need some defensive presence. And, Anthony Edwards is one of the best defenders, I think, in the lottery.
So is Krysten Peek kind of hinting towards GM Travis Schlenk that maybe they should consider moving up to go and get Ant-Man maybe?
They haven't considered it already. I don't know what they've been doing the last 7 months, to be honest. They have to look at every possibility. And if there is a trade for Ant, I think it's either going to be Charlotte or at 3, or it could be the Hawks.
Okay. And just a couple more minutes with you here. I don't want to take up too much of your Sunday, but I am thankful that you had a chance to join us. DJ Wagner, okay, the brother of DeJuan Wagner from, I think, Camden, New Jersey. Not sure how familiar you are with him.
The son of DeJuan Wagner.
I'm sorry, why did I say the brother? Yeah, the son of DeJuan Wagner. It feels like just yesterday I was just watching DeJuan Wagner. I didn't think he was that old to have a son. Maybe that's why I thought it was his brother. Then you have Mikey Williams, 2 guys at the top of the list for the class of 2023. What sets these guys apart? And are they pretty much 1-2 and everybody else? Or is there somebody else in there that you're like, hey, I know these guys are getting a lot of pub, but you definitely got to keep your eyes on this young guy who's only, freshman, sophomore pretty much at this point?
DJ Wagner, best sophomore in the country, hands down, no question. I mean, he made Trevor Keels and Posh Alexander look like nobodies as a freshman at the Hoop Hall Classic. And he did it so easy. It's like he already knew what he was going to do 3 steps before anybody else could figure out what was happening. And to see that confidence and poise of someone that's so young, we all know he's just going to get better and better and better. So when we're looking at who the best sophomore is in the country, it's not even a question. It's not even close. DJ Wagner is the top pick for sure. And I know he kind of flies under the radar. And Mikey and I actually had a discussion about him. He's like, yo, KP, who's this DJ Wagner kid? I was like, don't you start, Mikey. I was like, he is the truth. He deserves all the respect. Like, I would love to see y'all go head to head, but as of right now, I think he is definitely the best sophomore in the country.
Before we get into our, and I agree with you about that, by the way, before we get into our quick release segment where I'll just ask you a couple questions, and probably about 7 or 8 questions or so, and you just kind of answer with a yes or a no or a one word if you can or want. You mentioned KP, okay? Obviously, abbreviations, that's you. We saw a kid that is very, reminds a lot of people of another KP named Kristaps Porzingis, being Chet Holmgren. You checked out the game, okay, against Imani Bates and so forth, and it obviously looked like Holmgren stole the show and got the betterment. And yes, Imani did have a pretty good game himself. In terms of Imani Bates, what are some of the areas based on what we saw of improvement and just kind of overall what you kind of took away from those 2 guys, playing each other?
Yeah, I mean, that game was incredible. So high level, way more than I was expecting, especially this early in the season and from everything else that's been going on. I think the one area of improvement that Imani needs to work on is just controlling his emotions. Like we saw a couple times where he got burned by Chet or Chet hit a 3, and instead of, bringing the ball down and running the offense, it's like Imani just took a contested long 3 with 2 seconds into the shot clock. So he definitely needs to improve on just check your emotions. And he still had 36 points, but it felt like such a quiet 36 points.
It did.
Because Chet was so dominant. Like Chet was doing everything on the court. He was blocking shots. He was hitting threes. He was driving. He was creating for others. And so it felt more one-sided. And I know NBA scouts were texting me. They're like, yo, did you know Chet was this big or this good? And I was like, well, this is clearly the best I've seen him play. But yes, he is he's the number one player in the senior class for a reason. And he's got that unicorn quality to him. Mm-hmm. Like nobody knows what to think of him. And when I asked him, I said, how sick are you of people telling you you're too skinny? And he shook it off. He said, I'm getting stronger. I know it doesn't look like it, but I am getting stronger. And people that say to me, you're too skinny, probably have never seen me play a full game of basketball and are just like trolls on Twitter that don't even know me or know anything about high level basketball. So he kind of takes it in stride, but I was really, really impressed with Chet the other night.
Yeah, don't hate on the metabolism, okay? I'm about 150 myself and I'm 36, okay? Don't hate on there's going to become a point in time where some of the people are going to be saying what they're saying, not because of his basketball talents and his future going forward into the NBA, but because he's just this skinny guy. It's like we all want to be skinny and blah, 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 blah. Now I want to get into what we call our quick release segment. Again, I'm just going to ask you a couple questions. So I appreciate you joining us here on the show. First question for you is, where do you believe that Chet Holmgren will eventually end up committing to?
I think Gonzaga. That's how I feel. I mean, you already see his teammate Jalen Suggs is there, and it's a great fit for him in the sense where it's low pressure, great coach, Hall of Fame coach in Mark Few, and limited distractions. I mean, you're not Kentucky, Duke, North Carolina. You're not a blue blood, so you don't have all the TV games. You don't have all the pressures. You have kind of that area or that time where you can make mistakes and people aren't going to criticize you over and over again. And then by the time you get to the tournament, I mean, when was the last time Gonzaga didn't make the tournament?
Oh my God, it's easily been 20 years.
It's such a selling point for Mark Few and these top guys they're getting, because it's like, look, you can go to this blue blood, but maybe they don't make the tournament. You don't know what's going to happen, So I think he lands at Gonzaga personally.
I forget who was there a couple years ago. He reminds me of him so much. Ended up going, I think, in the lottery or something like that. Now for Portland Trailblazers, I can't think of the name, but he definitely Zach Collins. Just reminding me like of a Gonzaga type almost. Same question for you about Jaden Hardy. Where do you think he eventually lands?
I think he's going to stay in the Pac-12. It's either going to be, I think, Arizona or UCLA or the G League. I know he's watching closely as to what's going to happen with, John Kuminga, Jalen Green, Daishen Nix, and Isaiah Todd and their experience there and how it's going to help their draft stock come next year. So he's in no hurry to make a decision. And Chet told me he's going to decide sometime in January or February. But Jaden, I asked him, he's like, when's the last day I'm allowed to commit? Like he is going the distance for sure.
Not only do you get to hear where you think Krysten believe that Chet will play, but also when he will decide to make that commitment. And just for the people who don't know, on Chet Holmgren's list, Minnesota, Michigan, who also Jaden Hardy shares on his list, Gonzaga, North Carolina, Ohio State, Georgetown, who also Jaden Hardy has on his list as well, and Memphis, who I think they both have on their list. Jaden Hardy, Arizona, Arizona State, Georgia, I think UCLA, Texas Tech, Georgetown, Oregon, Kentucky, Michigan, Memphis, Kansas, and Illinois. So just wanted to get that out of the way real quick. Not who will they select, but who should the Minnesota Timberwolves select with the number one pick, if it were you, and obviously considering they keep the pick?
Anthony Edwards is the only one that makes sense to me where you plug him in right away alongside D'Angelo Russell. I know LaMelo Ball is getting, a lot of buzz and that the team went down to see him in a private workout last week. But honestly, I don't see them taking him. I think he's a better fit if Golden State wants him as a third Splash brother, or definitely Charlotte. Charlotte needs that star power, quality, and LaMelo is it. Like, I went to Australia, I saw him in 2 games, and he had to wear headphones during warm-ups because there were so many kids that got there early and were yelling his name for autographs.
Wow.
And every single time, both games, all his jerseys sold out. Online jerseys sold out. Games sell out. So if Charlotte wants that star player, then they got to take LaMelo. So then ultimately, I think the Warriors take James Wiseman at 2.
Must be nice to be light-skinned in 2020, I guess. Who do you believe that the Timberwolves will select in the 2020 draft at number 1?
Anthony Edwards. I think it's Ant-Man for sure. Yeah, I think it goes 1, 2, 3. Like I just.
Like you just said.
Yeah, and I haven't talked to the teams directly, but I've talked to a lot of other different teams and a lot of other people in the league, and they kind of seem to think the same thing.
Where do you think Russell Westbrook should land, or where does he land?
Man, this guy just switches teams more than anything I know. But
more than my cousin who's got a jersey. I got a cousin who literally has a jersey of every single team, and pending how they do, he will put on this jersey and snap. I'm like, dude, really? You have a closet full?
I mean, I guess LA makes sense. I know he lives there in the off season. Him and his wife both played basketball at UCLA. How it's going to happen? I mean, the Clippers gave up their right arm and 87 draft picks to OKC for Paul George and couldn't win a title. So I don't know how they make it happen. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. I haven't really even looked into like trade options because I've just been so tunnel vision on draft. But
sure,
I don't know. You got to get Woj or Shams on here to get better answers.
Got to find the contact for that first. Am I crazy for thinking that I would take RJ Hampton over LaMelo Ball?
No, you're not.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. RJ Hampton is he has a more rounded game. LaMelo cannot sit down and guard worth anybody. I mean, I could probably blow by LaMelo Ball at the top of the key if I wanted to. But I guess where LaMelo really excels is off the pick and roll read and also in the open court. Like, he has better court vision and a higher basketball IQ in making those decisions. And RJ is just, I mean, he went over to New Zealand, played for the NZ Breakers. A lot of people forgot about him. He only played 11 games there, and just did all right. Like, I saw him too. I went and I did a story on him, sat down with him, and it was interesting to see how the team and the program took to him, because he was so much younger than every other player on the team. And so it was an adjustment for him to try to get used to that. But I think he did great. And the fact that he worked out with Mike Miller and Penny Hardaway the entire quarantine time. And the biggest knock in his game is his outside jumper. And if you're working out with Mike Miller, like, how are you not supposed to improve in that area? So for sure. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people. I don't know where he's going to go, either late lottery or definitely before the 20s, but it'll be interesting. He already feels slighted. I know he does. Yeah. And he's going to use that as motivation his rookie year. I can see it in interviews. Like he's so over it.
I believe it. I just kind of feel like he's one of those guys that's going to be everything that everybody thought Dante Exum was going to be. At least I kind of feel that way. My last question for you is, are you ready for the LeVar Ball mouth? Like, are you ready for everything that could come along with that?
Do you know what's funny is when I sat down with Melo in Australia and he said to me, because I asked him straight up, I was like, do you believe you're the number 1 pick in the draft? Most definitely. Here's why. Way better answers than he's giving any of these reporters on these poor Zoom interviews, which has been like cringeworthy. Like, I sit on these Zoom calls with LaMelo and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, just answer the question. But after that, I was like, well, what is your dad going to have to say for you saying you're the number 1 pick? And he said to me, he's like, oh, KP, he's sitting this one out. And I'm like, what? And he said, no, he's sitting this one out. And to his credit, we haven't heard a ton from LeVar. Like there's been a couple things here or there, but he stayed relatively quiet. So I'm hoping that doesn't change in the next 2 or 3 days, and we just kind of get to know LaMelo at his own pace and what he wants to reveal. Like he's starting his own clothing line. I think he's trying to distance himself from like the ball circus and the ball family and be his own player. And I hope that's what we see in his rookie year.
Yeah, if we don't hear very much from LeVar Ball throughout the course of the next few days, I can tell you a couple things I'm going to do. Number one, I'm going to go play the lottery numbers because I just got a feeling that it's just as lucky as can be. And number two, I'm going to get my life together, get my life right with the good Lord himself. Just because I just can't imagine that that's even a possibility of happening. Krysten Peek, appreciate you so much and diligently being patient and waiting everything out while we had our other guests. Really appreciate it. Joining us here in the locker room, Krysten Peek, 3-level basketball analyst from Yahoo Sports and Rivals. Remember to follow her on Twitter. And yes, Krysten with a Y, Krysten. I told you I was going to do that again. Peek. Remember to follow her on Twitter. Thank you, Krysten, so much. I hope we can open up to having some more basketball, see you at some more games, probably find a way to end up sitting next to each other again at one of these events, Peach Jam or whatever, what have you. But thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, appreciate you. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
No worries. That was Krysten Peek joining us from Rivals as well as from Yahoo Sports, and really enjoyed, the information that she had to give. Her and Colby Dant, both two people I just kind of met recently, but kind of been seeing around a little bit and met through some mutual friends and so forth. And so it's always good to have the opportunity to kind of do a little fellowship over basketball. So thankful for everybody for checking this one out. Remember to go follow on social media at Tate's Take Hoops, TATESTAKEHOOPS, hashtag where basketball lives. I like to call it the best, the most entertaining, most educational, and most informational basketball content on the planet in the form of a podcast. And if it's 50 feet wide, 94 feet long, 22 feet and 1 1/4 inches out on the perimeter, or 23 feet and 1 3/4 inches out on the perimeter for the NBA versus college, then we're going to talk about it right here on the podcast. Tate's Take, the podcast, that is. You never know who you're going to get in terms of a guest here on the show. We got some really awesome people that are going to be coming up on the podcast a little bit later on this week. And as I'm going through my schedule here, trying to figure out what we got, Ken Segura from Georgia Tech, beat writer for him, bringing him on tomorrow at 6 o'clock. And hopefully Lloyd Pierce, we got him coming on shortly after the draft next week. So keep your eyes and your ears open for that. And remember to share this podcast with some friends, family, enemies, mamas, grandmamas, everybody all across the board. If they love basketball, I'm sure they'll love this podcast. So for those of you who have already subscribed or going to subscribe in the future, thank you so much for being sure to go ahead and do that as well. Remember, you can find that anywhere you find your favorite podcast, that being iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Red Circle, streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, all over the place. Looking forward to talking to you guys. Probably get another one of these cracking tomorrow and each day that we get closer to the draft. So really appreciate you guys for checking it out and for sharing the Tate's Take brand where basketball lives.